What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The Celestial Compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Beal. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Beal.
Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. Lots of really fun and unusual stuff today, but first I'd like to just update everybody on the astrology for February. This month is different from what we've been through. It's a transition month. It's not as tap your fingers on the table, when are things going to start happening, as January was, and it's also not the massive shifts and changes that are coming in March. This week in particular, a lot of really important conversations are probable, very important information coming to light, huge realizations, dropping lots and lots of baggage, and then things lightening up as Mercury moves into the sign of Aquarius, which is where the sun is. So we'll have the sun in Mercury in Aquarius, which is what I call the friend zone. And we start scooting over into the Valentine's weekend, which is a long weekend, actually, which is historically kind of a minefield for relationships. And it could go several different ways this year. Everyone is going to be really inclined towards breathing room, keeping things just a little bit loose, treating people like pals, although Venus, the goddess of love, is in the sign that makes her in love with love. So what is going on over that weekend is essentially either incredibly sweet, dreamy, romantic experiences leading to wanting to really put some structure on a situation. So things could be wonderful and then cause people to agree to stabilize what's going on, or they could go off into illusion and fantasy and then within a day or two hit walls of reality. So we'll see how it plays out for everyone. As the month goes on, the energy level starts to really pick up at the new moon in Pisces on the 20th, because Venus, the social director of the sky, moves into Aries, which is her huntress mode. And we don't want to just lounge around and watch streaming services and stay in fantasy land. We want to actually go make things happen, which is what propels us into the month that makes things happen, March. So reminder that my forecasts are always up at omtimes.com. You'll also find them at my site, empowermentunlimited.net. And one little plug before I go into the main show. Om Times this year has an awards, big awards program. If you go to ommies.com, ommies.com, you will find multiple categories where you can vote for luminaries in the conscious community. And if you go under astrology, you just might recognize my name. So all votes appreciated, but not requested. How's that? And I think you can vote more than once. Enough of that. Now we're going to the really fun stuff. Today we're talking about what I am calling cosmic mixology. And our guest is Lindsay Merbaum, a high priestess of home mixology who finds inspiration in the sky, the pagan calendar, and books. She creates cocktail and mocktail recipes for her Pick Your Potions newsletter called The Cauldron. And collections of her creations include the Zodiac Deck, which has just been released, featuring recipes for the 12 signs, and her Wheel of the Year deck, which honors the solstices, equinoxes, and the quarter turn sabbats, or sabbats, depending on how you want to say it. She's also innovated custom book tales, celebrating new releases and her favorite contemporary reads. She's the author of the queer feminist horror novel, The Gold Persimmon, which I highly recommend. And she runs the independent study series Study Coven, exploring feminist horror, queer magical realism, witches, ghosts, monsters, and more. Hey, Lindsay, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. And wow, what a wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. I have her two decks in my possession, and they're gorgeous. And also, if you follow her on Instagram, you'll get her recipes and testing and see all these incredible things that'll just make you want to get at them. But before we dive into that, how did your interest start in things that are witchy?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think it actually started, from birth, basically. I think I always had an attraction to speculative literature, mythology, occult theories and history, and it took really until like the witch revolution that we've been experiencing over the past few years, which is of course aligned with a lot of upheaval in our world, that I started to realize, this is actually me. This is actually my brand. I actually am this quote unquote weirdo, who's going to go get the skull fabric from Joanne's Fabric when it's not Halloween. Like I'm going to have the candles everywhere. Like I'm into this. I'm into thinking about the mythological divine and the ancient divine in terms of how I interact with that in my present time. So I think it was kind of the desire, the interest was always there, but it took a little bit of awakening for me, just kind of personally in my life, going through some different changes and growth and hard times, seeing more people, come out as witches in the world, taking on more reading in that vein, that started to make me realize this is not only something that I want to be part of, it's something I can be part of actively.
And it comes across as really organic and not forced at all in your brand, if you want to call it that. It does come across as absolutely authentic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, everyone will tell you that your brand should be authentic, but what does that really mean? I guess it means trying to, in some ways, your identity is your brand and vice versa, which I guess can be complicated. But I think it's about trying to just show up as yourself and, just not worrying about if other people think it's weird and, finding your people. But if you're entertained, then other people will be entertained, and if you're expressing what you honestly care about and believe in, there will be other people that resonates with somewhere.
And that is a message of the Leo full moon that was exact yesterday. So beautifully spoken and timely. Shifting just a tiny bit, then how did you come into mixing drinks? How did this rise as an interest and then an ability?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you said, your brand seems kind of organic, because I think a lot of different streams from my life started to merge and really come together in terms of me starting Pick Your Potions, which is my mixology business. But in terms of mixology specifically, I used to live in San Francisco, California, mixology capital of the world. There's a lot of interesting drinks coming out there. And when my partner and I first got together and were falling in love, we went out a lot and tried a lot of different cocktails and things. And they kind of inspired me to start trying to see what I could recreate at home. I began by just doing iterations of champagne cocktails, because champagne cocktails are really easy. You just get some champagne, you mix different liqueurs, maybe you try some different bitters, and you're off to the races. So I started from there and started creating some of my own recipes, particularly on certain themes, like after a friend or after a particular holiday, or to embody the mood of a workshop or something that I was leading. But it didn't really become more than just a little bit of a side hobby. I really started taking it more seriously through books, really. So what happened is my first book, The Gold Persimmon, as you mentioned, thank you, came out in late 2021. And I had the brilliant idea to create a compendium of cocktails and mocktails to accompany the book that would somehow kind of speak to the moods and themes of the book, so that you could get a sense of what it feels like and what the experience is like of reading it by having these drinks. And I thought it'd be a great giveaway for pre-orders. For those who don't know, every book that's out there was at some point pre-order available, meaning you can place the order before it's officially published, which is very important for authors in terms of how their sales work out. So I said to my publisher, I'm going to create this compendium that we can offer people as a pre-order incentive. And they were like, oh yeah, great, that's a great idea. I had no idea, Kathy, what I was getting myself into. I had no idea how much work it was going to be to craft 12 unique recipes and to photograph all of them, which I did multiple times. And at that point, it really made me get serious about it, though, because I had to actually record my specs. I had to record the instructions and the quantities exactly. I had to practice them, duplicate them, because now it was going to be shared with other people. So it wasn't just this off-the-cuff thing I'm making when somebody comes over to my house for a party. This was, something for other people to enjoy. And then I said, okay, I've done all that. That was a lot of work. And yet somehow I still decided that I should ask other writers if they wanted me to also make drinks for their books, which I call book tales. And just putting that out there among some Facebook groups of writers I was inundated with responses. All these different people writing all different kinds of books, from, novels, but also short story collections, memoir, poetry collections. I even did a poli-sci textbook. That's
great.
A shot. That's a red white shot, actually. It's delicious. So all these people were like, yeah, I want a book tale for my book as a means of promoting my book, as a means of celebrating my book. And from there, I realized that I could incorporate more of my interests into mixology. So obviously, I'm an author. I love literature. I live for books. But as I mentioned, I'm super into witchy stuff in terms of mythology, the tarot, history of witches, paganism, neo-paganism, Wiccans, all of this is really interesting to me. So I combined that interest through my first official deck, the Wheel of the Year deck, which I know you've got. And that goes through every sabbat of the year. So every equinox, every sabbat in between, every solstice. And there's 4 recipes for each of those that embody the colors, the flavors, some of the meaning behind that sabbat. For example, I'm enjoying an Imbolc cocktail right now, which is a holiday really big on dairy. So this is the Brigid. It's got cream in it, white corn whiskey, blackberries, and lavender syrup. Really simple and really delicious. And so that was my first big scale project of incorporating more of a witchy pagan vibe into my mixology. And then I just released Zodiac Deck. And this one has recipes for each zodiac sign. And there's a cocktail recipe and also a mocktail recipe. And adding the mocktail was a really important thing to me because I believe that everyone deserves a gorgeous drink. I think a drink is part of a celebration. It's part of, it's kind of like a potion experience where it changes your perspective of the evening. It changes how you feel. It, makes you feel like you're doing something for yourself. But that doesn't mean it has to have alcohol in it. And there are a lot of people, of course, who do not imbibe for all kinds of reasons. So it was important to me to take that step to being more inclusive by including mocktails in the Zodiac Deck. And likewise, the drinks are meant to reference various aspects of the mythology or the colors or stones that are related to each sign of the Zodiac, which required a fair bit of research, but was really, really fun to do. And the next one I want to do, which will probably come out next year, is a Living Goddess Deck. I would like to choose 13 figures from our times and create a drink embodying each one of them. Possible contenders include people like Michelle Obama, Greta Thunberg, Malala, Jonathan Van Ness, all kinds of people in our world who are doing goddessy things. So that's what I'm planning for probably 2024. That'll be the next one.
I have some thoughts on this. We will talk about this later. In fact, I have a real big thought about this.
Okay.
Let's back up just a tiny bit. We're going to be going into a break in about a minute and a half, but I want to
Okay.
back up. So, how did you go about moving from I am going to try to recreate this cocktail I had in this beautiful bar. I want to recreate this experience. Two, I have this target in mind and I'm going to come up with something that to me represents in liquid form whatever this thing is, like a party or an event or a holiday.
Yeah.
How did you, that's where I want to go. How did
Yeah.
you get that? What's that bridge? How did that bridge happen?
It's a really good question. I think it was a gradual process. I think part of it just stems from my personality and the way that I naturally approach things like flavors and like cooking or mixology, which is a kind of alchemy in a way, which is that I don't follow recipes to the T. I always put my own spin on everything. And I'm really playful when it comes to drinks. Like I've never been shy about trying to go out there with flavors or just experiment with things. But I think that really what happened was before I started doing mixology for books and before Pick Your Potion started, I was trying to get some creative coaching workshops off the ground. And this is in the before times, meaning pre-pandemic. I was I was kind of dancing around what ended up being Pick Your Potions, but I didn't know that's what was going to happen. So, for example, I was leading workshops that were designed to stimulate people's creativity, kind of
And
get
right
them.
now, I'm going to interrupt you. We will start with this again in just a second after the break. Hang in, everybody. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking today with Lindsay Merbaum, High Priestess of Home Mixology. And right before the break, we were starting to explore how you made the transition from recreating a drink that you had to coming up with ones that an event or something you were doing inspired. And you were talking about creative coaching.
Yeah, so before I started Pick Your Potions, and this was pre-pandemic, but pretty close to all of that going down, I was leading creative coaching workshops on themes like evolution or, leap year, things like that. And so I would offer the participants guided instruction, some creative exercises, and then at the end, there was always a cocktail that I would make. And I selected all of the ingredients or this particular recipe in order to match the theme of the workshop. And I'll be honest, I think people like the cocktails best. I think that was the favorite part of what I was doing. But it got me thinking about how a cocktail could be representative of an experience, and how a cocktail could, accompany something like that. So yeah, so when I finally was, getting my first book published after so many years of struggling to make that happen, it just occurred to me, I can represent probably pretty much anything through a drink somehow. There's going to be a way in which I can pull that from the text. But the first book tales I did for my own novel, Gold Persimmon, they weren't as elaborate as what I ended up doing for other people. I chose flavors and names for the drink that I thought were spot on for the book itself. Like there's one called The Do Not Disturb. The book takes place in 2 hotels. There's one called Sex and Mirrors. There's one called The Fog, which is this weird spectral element of the book. But when I came time to looking at other people's books, I did what I always do when I'm not sure what I'm up to, which is I studied. I would take copious notes on the book. I would look for all kinds of not just flavor references, but scents. Okay, what's happening in a key scene? Like what colors are they wearing? What are they smelling? What are they eating? And then I would turn all of that into a recipe that represented things about the book. So once I turned my eye to other people's work, then it started to get a lot more symbolic and a lot more representative, more deeply of what the work was about, to the point that writers would say to me, whoa, like, you know this book, I think, better than I do. And no, I don't think so. But it would speak to the point of, well, I do have pages of notes on your book. I really investigate. And it's gotten to the point where when I read something and I'm not supposed to be making a book tale out of it, I have to really resist the urge, because I've gotten so accustomed to that being my reading experience.
It's your method.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's my method. Mm-hmm.
So did you start making drinks for the various turns of the wheel as an exercise in self-amusement, or did you deliberately say, now I am going to design all these different drinks?
Kind of somewhere in the middle. I did decide I was going to make drinks for each sabbat, but I started with them individually, and after I'd done one or two, that was when my partner and I, who's my designer, really expanded to thinking about this as a whole project in and of itself, so that each sabbat would be part of a whole. So actually, as I went on, the project took about a year to complete. I went back and changed some of the earlier recipes, reshot some of the photos, etc., because everything that I've done with Figure Potions has been part of an evolution. I've never known exactly where it's going next, so everything changes really rapidly, but in an organic sort of way. Like, it's kind of, it's growing on its own at a natural pace.
So for each quarter turn in the book, in the wheel and in your deck, you have a card that explains what that particular feast is about, and then in the second paragraph, it seems to me, discuss key traits that then you interpreted or found a way to incorporate into the drinks for it. Would that be an accurate statement of the?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at Imbolc, which is St. Bridget's, it's Candlemas, it's Groundhog Day, and so you talk about light, fertility, warmth, and of course candles, and dairy and butter, and is there a favorite out of those? Is there one you've been drinking this week? There are 4 for each one, right?
I think actually Bridget is my favorite from the Imbolc set.
With the cream and the lavender, sir.
Yeah, I love this. I love lavender and blackberries together. There's a card for each sabbat, kind of explaining a little bit about what that sabbat is about, and also, connecting it to the drink itself. And I did that because I wanted to try to make this accessible to people who are not just, who may be interested in cocktails and maybe don't know as much about neo-paganism, or for people who were just curious. Personally, I always like to know what's behind something. Having context to understand what I'm experiencing always enhances it for me. So I felt like that was a good way of, introducing this concept to people, so they wouldn't feel like, oh, this isn't for me. It's only for people who, identify as pagan, or it's only for people who consider themselves to be witches. I think, as I said, I think beautiful drinks are for everyone. I think it's fun to learn about these things because it is tied to history and to, earlier cultures that some of which aren't around anymore. So I think it's cool to offer that information. And it's not exhaustive. They're just cards, but it gives you a little bit of a taste. Enough to get your interest piqued and to help you think differently about what you're drinking.
So I'm looking at the ones for Ostara, which would be the equinox coming up in March. Mm-hmm. Spring in the northern hemisphere, fall in the southern. And the one that is jumping out at me is the hare's egg, because it's bittersweet chocolate and bittersweet orange. Yes, I am making this.
That's one of my favorite ones, and it's so simple. And what's fun about that one is you can line the glass with chocolate. Now, you don't have to, but it's fun to do, and it creates a really cool visual effect. And then you get that taste of chocolate on your lip when you take a sip. So that one has mezcal, creme de cacao, coconut milk, amaretto, and you put orange zest on top. And it's just a really nice combo of that chocolate with the smokiness of mezcal, and obviously orange and chocolate are a classic combo. That's definitely one of my favorites. I also love from Ostara, I also love the Goddess of Dawn. That's another one that's Scotch, but it's also with white chocolate Godiva liqueur and passion fruit. And those flavors go together so beautiful. I guess, I think Ostara is probably one of my favorite sets, because I'm looking at these and I'm like, these are all my favorites.
They're all your favorite.
It's purple.
All your children, you love them all equally.
I love them.
I'm just going to go through. And then we have Beltane, which is May 1st. And so these would have a little bit more of a fieriness. Well, anyway. So, and I'd already said I'm going to make one of these this next weekend, even though it's not Beltane, because it has fire involved.
Well, that's okay. You don't have to wait till the specific Sabbat to make it. I think that's part of the fun of it. Yeah, we've got like some really nice sort of more spring, summer flavors. One of my favorites from Beltane is the Feast and Fire, which is actually a warm drink where with wine and brandy and amaretto and spices. That one's really nice. Yeah, it's kind of an unusual mix in the Beltane set. And I don't know, I think of Beltane as like the sexiest Sabbat. So you got to get that in there.
Yes, I was thinking that. All right, then we have the solstice in June. This is my ignorance, I did not know it was called Litha. Okay.
Oh, okay. Cool.
News to me.
We're all learning things, yes.
This has fire as well, but just in the title.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really fun one, too. I think my favorite one is the Summer Fire, which is kind of like a watermelon margarita, but the rim has tahini, which is so delicious and so much more interesting than salt to me. I also really love the Oak King, because that has bourbon and cantaloupe thyme syrup, and that is just like, that's just not something you're going to see every day.
No, and for those listening and go, what in the world is that? There are syrup recipes in the back. I just caught myself. You do have lots of syrup recipes.
Some of these recipes require a little bit of patience in terms of, you need to make a syrup. But making syrup is usually about as simple as just boiling water. I mean, really what we're doing is we're adding ingredients to a pot. We're, bringing to a boil and simmering it. It's pretty simple. I do try as much as I can to make recipes accessible. There's a lot of really fun stuff that mixologists are playing with these days, and not all of it is something that people are going to have at home or that they're going to even be able to find in stores, which is one of the reasons why for the Zodiac Deck, you'll see at the very back there are cards not only explaining how to make the syrups, all the syrup recipes are included, even simple syrup, but there's also cards explaining where to find the lesser known ingredients, things like rose water or, hibiscus tea that maybe you don't see every day, with suggestions of where to find those things in person and online. Because again, I want people to feel like they can actually do these recipes.
And there's one that you use that I remember you were sort of falling in love with earlier, and I see it in a number of these, butterfly pea flower tea.
Yes, that is a great thing to talk about. Okay, you all know what this is, you just don't know that you know. So Empress Gin is really well known as a purple gin. How did they get that color? It's butterfly pea flower tea, magic butterfly pea flower tea. It turns things purple or blue naturally, not just hot water, but any liquid. And it has no flavor by itself. So it's 100% non-food dye, organic way to change the colors of what you're working with. I don't have anything against food dye, but I think if you can get a flower to turn your drink bright purple, that's pretty fun.
Again, self-amusing. We go back to that. Continuing going through the wheel, the beginning of August, the Harvest Festival, Lunasa.
Yes. Lunasa is a really special one because Lu is my partner's patron deity. So the Dapper Gentleman cocktail is named for Jen. Jen Sakura is my partner. And actually, that's one of the first recipes I ever designed, ever, as a mixologist, was the Dapper Gentleman. It's bourbon, dark rum, St. George, spiced pear liqueur, walnut liqueur, and Bitter Queen's Marie Laveau tobacco bitters with a cherry. Really nice. pretty alcohol forward. People who like Manhattans and old fashions, definitely a big fan. One of my favorite ones from Lunasa is the Ambrosia, which has gin, raspberry jam, rose water. There's that rose water, egg white, and raspberries. So those are all things you actually can find pretty easily. But when combined, you get this light, fruity, really deliciously floral, frothy drink that's just delightful. I mean, honestly, like all of these are really fun. There's
of
blackberry
course.
coffee, and the Sun and Earth has apple brandy and Blue Moon beer. Believe it or not.
Something for everybody. Then we have, is it Mabon or Mabon?
I say Mabon.
You say Mabon. This is the equinox in September.
Yeah.
And what catches my eye here is floating pumpkin, which has pumpkin milk, which is something you have the recipe for making. So basically this pumpkin milk vodka and coffee bitters. That would appeal. That sounds better than pumpkin spice to me personally.
Exactly. It's pumpkin for people who maybe are not so into the pumpkin spice. And the pumpkin milk is just some pumpkin filling, just cooked with some seasonings and some milk, and then you just strain it. So you're getting that wonderful pumpkin flavor without the bits of pumpkin. So that drink overall is very subtle and soft. It's a nice one.
Well, then you have Samhain, which is Halloween, and it's all spooky. Persephone, Vampire's Kiss. There will be those who will want that. The Veil. Oh, interesting.
That's one of my favorites. I mean, Samhain is my favorite Sabbath. I can't get enough of Halloween Samhain. And one of my favorite recipes is the Persephone, which you mentioned, and the Veil. The Veil is a champagne-based cocktail. So going back to my roots, right? With absinthe and melon liqueur, just a little bit, and cucumber strips. So it has this really cool effect. It's really effervescent and refreshing. And then the Persephone is Scotch-based with pomegranate and lapsang souchong tea, which is a Chinese tea that's very, very smoky. And that's also mixed with honey and honey liqueur and rose water. So, yeah, that's a really fun one. And there's a pumpkin one in there, too, the Pumpkin Jack.
And then we get to Yule, and everything there looks very familiar to those of us in the Western world. Candy cane, gingerbread, evergreen, and the Holly King. Perfect.
Yeah. That's the Yule. The Yule was the first set I ever did. Some of the recipes have changed since I first worked on them, but that's a really special one, and I think it is nice when it correlates to an identifiable holiday that people get behind, like Christmas.
Yeah, and the candy cane one looks like it really would taste like a candy cane. So
it really does. Yeah,
drinkable candy cane.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, but not quite so sickeningly sweet.
And won't get stuck in your teeth, probably.
No, definitely won't get stuck in your teeth.
So let's move on to what the process was to go from, okay, I've done these nice pagan celebration drinks. Let's move on to the Zodiac.
Woo.
How did that come about? How did you decide to do that? When we're going to be going to break in about a minute and a half, so no, I'm going to interrupt you in a second.
Okay, no worries. Honestly, it was my partner's idea. My partner / designer, Jensen Sakura. They are really, really into astrology. They know more about it than I do, and they're like, "Come on, you got to do a Zodiac deck." And one of the reasons I thought, okay, let's dive into this is because the Zodiac applies to everyone. Whether you're into it or not, you probably know what your sun sign is. And so it's something that automatically has a correlation that people can have a context for. So I thought it'd be fun, and I thought it would make people feel special to have a drink for their sign.
And I didn't notice in this that you made the drink categories by element. It really does look like each one is specific to the energies of that sign without, being able to take all 4 fire ones and say, oh, these are related. They all feel like they're specific.
Yeah, they're all really specific, and the colors and the symbols can denote, which one is like which kind of sign, so that they, go together. But yeah, I wanted each one to really kind of represent the personality and the story behind that particular sign. So they're not necessarily lumped in terms of, okay, all the earth signs are like this. And I wanted to get a little more into the specifics of each, of all the characteristics associated with different signs.
And we'll go further into that after the break. Hang on in, everybody. We'll be back. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking to home mixology high priestess Lindsay Merbaum, and we're talking about her Zodiac deck, which has a cocktail and a mocktail version for every sign of the zodiac. And I notice there's a card for each sign that actually has some mythological background.
Yep, of course. I can't resist that mythology. Yeah, I again wanted to present these drinks within some kind of context to help people think about why are these ingredients in this drink and how does that relate to this personality or to this mythology. And so I, did a fair bit of research trying to figure out, what is the general consensus about different zodiac signs and where they come from and what they mean. And some have very specific stories behind them. Some have more just general associations. But I found that to be a really cool part of the project. And I feel like it changes the experience of the deck to include that information and to give people a little bit of context and also to help them think about, well, what was the mixologist, myself, thinking when she put all this together.
And it seems to me that the drinks look like they grow out of the mythology to a large extent.
Yes, exactly. I thought about, okay, what ingredients should I include based on what I know about this sign? And sometimes the associations are more obvious than others. Like sometimes there's a particular fruit that is associated with that sign. So, okay, put that in there. But there are also colors and stones associated with different signs. And, and even just where the mythology comes from, like the Cancer cocktail and mocktail Feast of Babylon. I was thinking about the Babylonian zodiac and the reference there with the giant crab. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to include some ingredients then that reference Babylonian times and the delicious things that people were enjoying then. So yeah, I tried to really think about, what would go into this drink that could represent the mythology, that could represent where the sign came from, how it came into being, rather than just, okay, well, Aries should have something, fiery, okay, or okay, Taurus is gonna be this way. I really wanted to think about it in broader strokes than that, beyond just our stereotypical associations with each sign, and really think about where they came from.
And how did you, this may be too much of a trade secret, how did you come up with a way to translate what you'd done with the cocktail into the mocktail version? Because I see some really interesting substitutions in some of these.
I really like doing mocktails because they're such a fun challenge. And I know that right now, non-alcoholic liquors are kind of all the rage. A lot of people went dry for January. Again, a lot of people have tuned into the idea that you don't have to have alcohol in your cup for it to be a beautiful, special drink. I tend to avoid that, though, because not everyone has the means to find those ingredients, and also they are a lot more expensive. And I do think that if you're having a cocktail that's actually a mocktail that doesn't have alcohol in it, I don't think you should have to pay the same price per se. But maybe that's just my opinion. So I try to get really creative with how to figure out a different way of achieving a similar effect using ingredients that are non-alcoholic. So that can be difficult. But I really think it's kind of a fun challenge to go that route. And so some of the mocktails are quite different from the cocktails, but I think that's great because I think they also can stand alone as their own drink, not just as an iteration of something. And they have their own features and their own flavors.
And I noticed that they're served in different vessels. There's very specifically chosen glassware for each drink.
Yeah, I really have to, have an extensive glassware collection for this. Salvation Army and Goodwill. That's my secret. That's my trade secret for getting all the... Yeah, what kind of glass something is served in does actually matter. It does matter in terms of volume, it matters in terms of presentation, and it matters in terms of taste and experience. So I do put a lot of thought into that as well.
And it's part of the magic of you're drinking a potion. You're not just going to stick this in a jam jar.
Yeah, although that could be cute too. But yeah.
Cute, yes.
I really feel like, there might not be a noticeable difference for a lot of people if they drink their drink in a coffee mug versus if they put it in a martini glass. Like for some people, they won't notice necessarily a difference in flavor, but I guarantee it will make you feel a little bit different to have a stemmed glass versus to be drinking out of a coffee mug. I think it changes the experience. It changes how you're presenting the experience to the world, and in terms of what you think you're doing in that moment, and the kind of awareness that goes into that. And then also in terms of alcohol, there are all kinds of theories about what kind of glass different things should be served in terms of when they reach your nose and how they reach your nose and how it interacts with your palate. So there's all kinds of theory with that too. But I think that presentation really matters. I really do. I think that presentation is part of the experience.
It's all part of the alchemy, then, is what it sounds like.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I'm going through some of the syrups here, and I am guessing that you made some of these up.
I've made all of them up.
You've made all of them up, like pistachio syrup. Yeah, I think I got a bag in the kitchen I should try.
So that's kind of similar to orgeat, which is, for those who like tiki drinks, you'll often find orgeat mixed in. And orgeat it's almond based. It often has orange blossom water in it, and it's made from the water you soak the almonds in. So you actually discard the almonds and you take the water from that, and that ends up becoming the orgeat. In this case, with the pistachio syrup, I took that and flipped it, where the pistachios themselves are getting ground down in a blender with liquid and spices and turned into a thicker substance that you then squeeze through a milk bag or a nut bag, they're also called, believe it or not, in order to get the resulting syrup. So it's a different consistency. It's a different way of approaching it. But yeah, I mean, it's mixologists for a long time have been working with things like this, just maybe in a slightly different way, or just maybe people just haven't heard of their methods. But behind the scenes, this stuff has been going on.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the Zodiac drinks. Are there ones that you are especially fond of? I know I'm making you choose among your children.
Yeah, you're putting me in such a tough spot. I'm really partial to the Gemini.
Okay.
To the mocktail. So these are swizzles, which means you put the ice in the glass and you use your swivel spoon or stick to agitate the ice, and it mixes the drink and also gets the glass really frosty. So that's a new technique that people might learn through doing this cocktail. That's really easy and simple and fun, but it produces that effect. And the cocktail has gin and chartreuse or falernum. Those are both liqueurs that you should be able to find at most specialty shops. Lemon juice and lavender syrup, which there's a recipe for to make for yourself. And then the mocktail has green tea, sparkling water, likewise lavender syrup, and then it also has thyme rosemary syrup. So this is a good example of what you were talking about, Kathy, in terms of, well, how do I choose what the mocktail is gonna be about? One of the reasons I chose thyme rosemary for this was to mirror the botanicals that you get in the chartreuse or falernum, which are botanical-based liqueurs. Obviously in a mocktail, you're not going to use liqueur. You're not going to use something that has alcohol. So I'm thinking, okay, how else can I use those kinds of botanicals to get a similar flavor? It's also sweet, because liqueurs have quite a bit of sugar in them also, and kind of give that same sort of experience without employing actual alcohol.
And the recipe for the thyme rosemary syrup sounds phenomenal, so people are going to Want that. Okay, which other ones?
So many, really all of them.
Okay.
I really like the Aquarius a lot, actually. Yeah.
Let me pass judgment.
I know.
Oh,
I know
Enke's Waters. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. So the cocktail is kind of similar to a sangria kind of drink in a sense because it's wine based. So it's Pinot Grigio with mango syrup, and the syrup recipe, by the way, includes saffron and cardamom. And then you add fresh peaches to that and cherry bitters. And then for the mocktail, you've got sparkling water, tart cherry juice, again, the mango syrup, fresh peaches, and fresh cherries. So that's just really nice and refreshing. And for the photo, I garnished it with a blue orchid that's actually made out of candy, which I made.
Because you make it all righto. And this one comes out of the Sumerian tradition. This myth.
Yeah. So that's why I chose Enki for the name. There were some Sumerian ties. I will admit that I am personally very interested in Sumerian mythology. So anytime I saw a reference to that anywhere, I kind of jumped on it. And also thought, okay, well, there's an opportunity to talk about a kind of mythology that I don't hear about a lot. Most people don't really know anything about Sumerian mythology. It's not as well known as, say, like Greek or Egyptian mythology, but it does have a lot of influence over other mythologies and our belief systems now, even if we're not aware of it. So I thought it'd be cool to mix that in.
So you can learn while you're playing at your home bar here. I noticed that the one for Pisces looks appropriate. It looks like it's got mermaidy colors, and again, the butterfly pea flower tea with a big stripe of purple in it.
Yep.
I mean, all of these really do look like if people want to be witchy and create their own little potions, this would really fit in with it quite remarkably.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think of them as potions. I do think, as I just keep saying, is the experience of making yourself a fun drink like this. I think that is potion-like in terms of it elevating your mood or making you feel like you did something nice for yourself that day. And also, I know our audience can't see what we're looking at here, but all of the photos of these drinks, and each one is on its own card. I took all of them myself, and that's been part of my journey as well, is developing that skill of photography. And I don't take cocktail photos the way that most people take cocktail photos. I tend to create more elaborate backdrops that include elements that are tied to the symbology of the drink. I tend to, employ some different tricks there than the standard, and I think that's kind of part of the magic of it too. Everything about this is kind of designed to be magical in that way. So it's a fun thing in the world.
So let's segue into Pick Your Potions, which is something that you offer through. Well, first off, your Instagram handle is Pick Your Potions, and you'll often roll out tantalizing bits of drinks, but you also have a newsletter, The Cauldron.
Yeah. So Pick Your Potions is the name of my mythology practice, my mythology small business, and The Cauldron, which is on Substack, is my newsletter. And it's a really good place to get a deeper dive into what I'm doing. I also release some recipes there that I only share in The Cauldron. I have one coming up on Valentine's Day, actually, called My Bloody Valentine, and I will only be releasing it on Substack. So if you sign up or check it out that day to read it, you can enjoy it, and it's free content. But that's another way for me to kind of connect with my audience, and also another way for me to promote authors and their books, because I keep releasing more book tales. I have a column in the magazine Electric Literature where I release one book tale a month, and then I like to keep tabs on those authors, so I'll share news and updates about them in The Cauldron as well, for a little literary citizenship. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in The Cauldron. And I am on Instagram, and I'm also on TikTok at Pick Your Potions.
So people can see some of, like, when you're making a syrup or you're just generally lounging around being witchy outdoors. There are some of those pictures.
Or me in my pajamas, either way, yeah. And I should mention that I do have an Etsy shop, also called Pick Your Potions, and I'm running a Valentine's Day sale. If you buy 2 or more items, any items from the shop, you'll automatically get 10% off with the code D-Day sale. So this feels like a very, very salesy plug, but I must mention I have this sale going. Please take advantage.
Excellent. Excellent. This solves a problem that existed earlier. Yeah. So, well, it's all tasty. I intend to dive into some of these with my usual drinking partner in crime very shortly, as I mentioned before the break. So your website is your name. Would you spell it for people,
Yeah,
please?
my website is L as in Lindsay, Merbaum.com. That's M as in Mary, E-R, B as in boy, A, U as in unicorn, M as in Mary. You also can find my website through my Linktree on Instagram. And through there, you can find everything else that I'm doing on my website. And the Cauldron, too, I think, links to my website. And yeah, I have a shop there as well. And then I also have my shop on Etsy. And there are some products on Etsy that are only available there. So just FYI, another reason to scope that out.
And just basically use the handle Pick Your Potions. And if you look around for that, listeners, you will find her somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, it's there.
Yep.
TikTok.
No Twitter anymore, though. Yeah, that's gone.
Well, that's another story.
That's
Anyway.
another story.
I'm so glad you came. It's always a blast talking with you. I previously interviewed Lindsay for her book. And cheers, everybody, and happy Valentine's. Talk to you next month. Next month. No, later in this month. There we go. I'm confused. Bye.
Thank you.